Hello, I was meant to not the first one, second one, 1, 2, 3. English. You speak English? I speak English. Speaking English. Okay, we've got to have the news, Australian news. The news is Australia, Australian news.
Australian Army Future News, Google search. The Australian Army is undergoing modernisation and a strategic shift toward combined arms combat. Driven by Focus Alliance, and a greater focus on the Indo-Pacific region, key developments include the acquisition of new land combat vehicles like the M1A2 CEPV-3 tanks, AS-21 Redback IFVs, and AH-6 Apache helicopters. The Army is also focusing on an integrated, multi-domain force with the Navy and Air Force, as well as strengthening regional partnerships through exercises and engagements. Strategic shift and modernization. A UK-US alliance, the trilateral security partnership with the US and UK is a major driver for increasing defense spending and modernizing the military. 2024 National Defense Strategy. This strategy is reorienting the Army from its counterterrorism roles to one capable of long-range strike and combined arms combat in the region. Literal focus. The Army's future role is being framed as a key component of a maritime strategy to deny approaches and defend Australia from the littoral coastal regions. New equipment and capabilities. Vehicles. The Army. Australian Army Future News, Google search. The Australian Army is undergoing modernisation and a strategic shift toward combined arms combat. Driven by Focus Alliance, and a greater focus on the Indo-Pacific region, key developments include the acquisition of new land combat vehicles like the M1A2 CEPV-3 tanks, AS-21 Redback IFVs, and AH-6 Apache helicopters. The Army is also focusing on an integrated, multi-domain force with the Navy and Air Force, as well as strengthening regional partnerships through exercises and engagements. Strategic shift and modernization. A UK-US alliance, the trilateral security partnership with the US and UK is a major driver for increasing defense spending and modernizing the military. 2024 National Defense Strategy. This strategy is reorienting the Army from its counterterrorism roles to one capable of long-range strike and combined arms combat in the region. Literal focus. The Army's future role is being framed as a key component of a maritime strategy to deny approaches and defend Australia from the littoral coastal regions. New equipment and capabilities. Vehicles. The Army is inducting new equipment, including the M1A2 CEPV-3 tanks, AS-21 Redback infantry fighting vehicles, and Boxer 8x8 reconnaissance vehicles. Armaments. New systems include AS-9 Huntsman self-propelled howitzers and NASAMS air defense systems. Aviation. New AH-6 Apache attack helicopters and UH-60M Black Hawk helicopters are being acquired. Training. A new Australian-delivered course for Air and Missile Defence Force Controllers, ADAFCO, is being developed, with certification by the US Army. Regional engagement and exercises. Indo-Pacific Endeavour. The Army is actively participating in this regional engagement program, including port visits and knowledge exchanges with countries like Sri Lanka and the Maldives. International cooperation. The Army is engaging in joint exercises with allies, such as Orient Shield with Japan and the US. Partnership building. There is a strong emphasis on building and strengthening partnerships throughout the region through diplomatic and military activities. Home on the range. The Australian Army prepares for the future. The 22nd of September 2025, the 2024 National Defence Strategy, NDS, outlined Australia's requirement for a land force capable of combined arms combat and long-range strike. ACR, Lowy Institute. The Littoral Pivot, the Army's role in the maritime fight. The 1st of October 2025, some have argued that this is a zero-sum statement. I instead see it as sum. We are designing the Army of the future to help maximise the country. Australian Army. Army News and Events, Defence. Orient Shield, strengthens bonds, with Japan, US. Australian soldiers are participating in Exercise Orient Shield with Japan and the US for the first time. www.defence.gov.au. Australian Defence Programmes, Asian Military Review. The 4th of June 2025, Land Procurements. The Army is inducting copious amounts of new equipment, M1A2 CEPV-3 tanks, Abrams-based combat engineering vehicles, HIMARS. Boxer. Asian Military Review. Busy building ties and trust throughout the region, defence. The 20th of October 2025, hot on the heels of a high-level visit by our Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister Richard Marles to Sri Lanka and Maldives. Australian Defence. www.defence.gov.au. Australia's new American-made battle tank goes on display at Melbourne. The 11th of September 2024, the M1A2 battle tank, boasting a 120mm cannon, will eventually replace Australia's older fleet of 59 M1A1 Abrams tanks that were purchased. Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Australia Defence Budget Poised to Grow, APDR. The 27th of October 2025, amid escalating tensions in the Indo-Pacific, shifting geopolitical fault lines and growing strategic competition, Australia is accelerating efforts. Asia Pacific Defence Reporter. Significant milestone for Australian delivered course, defence. The 23rd of October 2025, as the concept of ADAFCOs is new to Australia, a large part of this package of work was the education and demonstration of the value of this. Critica. www.defence.gov.au. Busy schedule of regional engagements continues, defence. The 21st of October 2025, busy schedule of regional engagements continues ** latest updates. HMAS Ballarat completes successful port visit in Cambodia. Wednesday the 22nd of October 20. www.defence.gov.au. Lovi INSTITUTE https://www.loinstitute.org. Home on the Range, the Australian Army prepares for the future. The 22nd of September 2025, the 2024 National Defence Strategy, NDS, outlined Australia's requirement for a land force capable of combined arms combat and long-range strike. ACR. Australian ARMY https://www.army.gov.au. The literal pivot, the Army's role in the maritime fight. The 1st of October 2025, some have argued that this is a zero-sum statement. I instead see it as sum. We are designing the Army of the future to help maximize the country. www.defence.gov. au https://www.defence.gov.au. Army news and events, defense. Orient Shield, strengthens bonds, with Japan, US. Australian soldiers are participating in Exercise Orient Shield with Japan and the US for the first time. Asian Military RUVIEW https://www.asianmilitaryreview.com. Australian Defence Programmes, Asian Military Review. The 4th of June 2025, land procurements. The Army is inducting copious amounts of new equipment, M1A2 SEP EV3 tanks, Abrams-based combat engineering vehicles, HIMARS. Boxer. www.defence.gov. au https://www.defence.gov.au. Busy building ties and trust throughout the region, defence. The 20th of October 2025, hot on the heels of...
Alright.
Leidos and Aspen Medical to bid for Defence Health Programme, Australian Defence Magazine. 1/3 free articles left. Leidos Australia and Aspen Medical have entered into a teaming agreement to bid for the Australian Defence Contracted Health System, ADCHS, programme, an opportunity to redefine how healthcare supports the readiness of Australia's Defence Force, ADF. Leidos Australia Chief Executive, Paul Chase said the agreement will seek to transform how health services contribute to defence readiness. Our mission is to deliver more than healthcare. Our goal is to build a nationwide, technology-enabled system that keeps defence's most important capability. Its people, mission-ready at all times. Together with Aspen Medical, we'll work to provide the right care, in the right priority and place. For the right outcome and cost. With the uncertainty Australia is facing, surge capacity and flexibility...
Okay, how do we know I'm going to be talking through this when I want to talk? I don't care. When I want to talk, I talk. Anyway, freedom of speech. What was meant when they were expand the medical and providing the right care, surgeon capacity, surge capacity and flexibility in defense health has ever been more. Righto. More nicer, more champion, more healthy, better God.
Flexibility for defense health has never been more important, Chase stated. Together, we can help
Oh yeah, the question. What was the question about the next generation that we're living in?
Defense build a sustainable health system that's fit for the future force. Together, Leidos and Aspen Medical will seek to deliver an integrated, mission-focused care model that includes primary and specialist medical services, mental health support and occupational rehabilitation for ADF personnel. Aspen Medical has been a trusted provider of contracted health services to the ADF and defense forces around the world for more than 2 decades. We're incredibly pleased to be partnering with Leidos Australia to bid for this essential defense service contract. We believe our collective understanding of defense's healthcare needs, Australia's strategic landscape, and our proven ability to deliver high-quality care at scale positions us as a trusted partner in supporting the ADF's health capability, Aspen Medical Group. Chief Executive Officer, Craig Fitzgerald said. Under the agreement, Aspen Medical will provide support as a health service delivery partner, supplementing and expanding Leidos' own existing defense knowledge and experience in the delivery of programs for the ADF as well as internationally for the Australian government.
This was NDIS program.
NDI's program news, Google search. The NDIA has updated the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits 2025-26 and supporting documents. Date, the 14th of October 2025. The 15th of October 2025, the final report of the independent review of the NDIS, working together to deliver the NDIS, was delivered on the 7th of December 2023. News and events and information sessions, external website, latest news stories and videos. Sign up for our NDIS and newsletters. Sign up for our ... Ndis overhaul, 100K children with autism and learning difficulties to be removed, placed in new Thriving Kids scheme from July 2027. Children with mild autism to be removed from the NDIS under new 9 News Australia. Ndis is unsustainable, diverting moderately autistic children to a new system called Thriving Kids in 2027. Federal government announces major shake-up to NDIS, 9 News Australia. 9 News Australia. Ndis Minister announces $2 billion program to support children with mild to moderate developmental delays or autism outside Ndis. Health Minister announces new scheme to divert children with autism. ABC News, Australia. 1 hour ago, dodgy providers delivering unsafe or poor quality services to participants of the NDIS face stricter oversight, as Labor expands enforcement. NDIS legislation changes have now started. The table below highlights the legislative changes that took effect on the 3rd of October 2024. Some changes have already. The 20th of August 2025, what's been announced? Mr. Butler told the National Press Club the federal government would tip $2 billion into Thriving Kids, a new program. A new pilot will launch later this year with $20 million for NDIS therapy providers as part of the Quality Supports Program. As part of the therapy pilot, the Australian government is implementing a major crackdown on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, removing access for children. Government crackdown on disability scheme, 7 News. 7 NEWS Australia. The 25th of August 2025, news consultation on draft lists of NDIS supports, what we have heard. Release of the final report of the independent review into the NDIS. NDI's meanings, Google search. NDIS stands for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is Australia's national program for providing funding and support to people with permanent and significant disabilities. It is delivered by the National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIA, and aims to help eligible individuals with a permanent and significant disability access the support, services, and equipment they need to live more independently and participate in community life. Key functions and goals of the NDIS. Provides funding. The NDIS provides funding directly to eligible participants for supports and services. Individualized plans. It creates individualized plans to help individuals achieve their personal goals, such as increased independence, participation in the community, and reaching lifestyle goals. Offers support. The NDIS offers a range of supports, which can include therapies, like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, training, and assistance with daily activities. Funds equipment. It also covers necessary equipment and technology, such as assistive devices, home modifications, and aids. Community connection. The NDIS connects people with a disability to services and activities in their community. How to apply. You can contact the NDIS by phone on 1-800-800-110. You can also contact your local NDIS office or a local area coordinator partner. The NDIS website has information on eligibility and how to apply. How the NDIS works. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, is Australia's first national scheme for people with disabilities. The NDIS provides funding directly to Individ. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. What does NDIS mean? Everyday independence. What does NDIS mean in Australia? The NDIS means National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. It's Australia's way of providing funding to people with disability. Everyday independence. National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIS. The National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIA, implements the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. The NDIS supports people with significant impairment. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. National Disability Insurance Scheme reforms and reviews. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, supports people with a permanent and significant disability that affects their ability to take part in everyday. Australian Government Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. Am I eligible? NDIS. Disability requirements. Yes. Go to the next question. No. The NDIS is only available to people who have a disability caused by a permanent impairment. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. NDIS explained what it means for you, MacArthur Community Care. Asterisk help a person to reach their personal lifestyle goals, enable participation in the community, increase a person's independence. NDI's meanings, Google search. NDIS stands for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is Australia's national program for providing funding and support to people with permanent and significant disabilities. It is delivered by the National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIA, and aims to help eligible individuals with a permanent and significant disability access the support, services, and equipment they need to live more independently and participate in community life. Key functions and goals of the NDIS. Provides funding. The NDIS provides funding directly to eligible participants for supports and services. Individualized plans. It creates individualized plans to help individuals achieve their personal goals, such as increased independence, participation in the community, and reaching lifestyle goals. Offers support. The NDIS offers a range of supports, which can include therapies, like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy, training, and assistance with daily activities. Funds equipment. It also covers necessary equipment and technology, such as assistive devices, home modifications, and aids. Community connection. The NDIS connects people with a disability to services and activities in their community. How to apply. You can contact the NDIS by phone on 1-800-800-110. You can also contact your local NDIS office or a local area coordinator partner. The NDIS website has information on eligibility and how to apply. How the NDIS works. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, is Australia's first national scheme for people with disabilities. The NDIS provides funding directly to Individ. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. What does NDIS mean? Everyday independence. What does NDIS mean in Australia? The NDIS means National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. It's Australia's way of providing funding to people with disability. Everyday independence. National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIS. The National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIA, implements the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. The NDIS supports people with significant impairment. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. National Disability Insurance Scheme reforms and reviews. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, supports people with a permanent and significant disability that affects their ability to take part in everyday. Australian Government Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. Am I eligible? NDIS. Disability requirements. Yes. Go to the next question. No. The NDIS is only available to people who have a disability caused by a permanent impairment. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. NDIS explained what it means for you, MacArthur Community Care. Asterisk help a person to reach their personal lifestyle goals, enable participation in the community, increase a person's independence. MacArthur Community Care. NDIS meaning. What does the NDIS stand for? Inclusive home care. Core supports include help with daily activities, personal care, and community participation. Then there are services aimed at developing your skills. Some serve inclusive home care. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, https://www.ndis.gov.au. How the NDIS works. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, is Australia's first national scheme for people with disabilities. The NDIS provides funding directly to individ. Everyday INDEPENDENCE https://www.everydayin.com.au. What does NDIS mean? Everyday independence. What does NDIS mean in Australia? The NDIS means National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. It's Australia's way of providing funding to people with disability. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, https://www.ndis.gov.au. National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIS. The National Disability Insurance Agency, NDIA, implements the National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. The NDIS supports people with significant impairment. Australian Government Department of Health, Disability and AGING https://www.health.gov.au. National Disability Insurance Scheme Reforms and Reviews. The National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, supports people with a permanent and significant disability that affects their ability to take part in everyday. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS, https://www.ndis.gov.au. Am I eligible, NDIS? Disability requirements. Yes. Go to the next question. No. The NDIS is only available to people who have a disability caused by a permanent impairment. The MacArthur Community CARE https://www.macarthurcommunitycare.com.au. NDIS explained what it means for you, MacArthur Community Care. Asterisk help a person to reach their personal lifestyle goals, enable participation in the community, increase a person's independence. Inclusive Home CARE https://www.inclusivehomecare.com.au. NDIS meaning. What does the NDIS stand for? Inclusive Home Care. Core supports include help with daily activities, personal care, and community participation. Then there are services aimed at developing your skills. Some serve.
If I don't have any.
You know what?
I don't have any.
You don't nothing. You're a thief. You don't say anything anymore. You lost your rights. Very sure. No, makes sense.
Oh, there was NDIS. That's what they got it in Australia. NDIS.
Government NDIS News, Google Search. Updated NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits 2025-26. The NDIA has updated the NDIS pricing arrangements and price limits 2025-26 and supporting documents. News and events and information sessions, external website, latest news stories and videos. Sign up for our NDIS and newsletters. Sign up for our 4 days ago, the NDIS Commission reports to the Honourable Mark Butler MP, the Minister for Health and Ageing, and the Minister for Disability and the National. 2 hours ago.
At Valia, we know a healthy gut means a
Let's go first this morning to that breaking news.
This is new. Sportsbet's fixed odds exotics guarantee. Now you can lock in fixed odds on exotics. And if the relevant tote pays more, you'll get the bigger payout guaranteed. New from Sportsbet.
What's gambling really costing you?
Well, it was a tough day for Anthony Albanese yesterday. The Labor leader rocked by a fresh campaign blunder. Let's bring in Defence Minister Peter Dutton from Launton in Queensland and Deputy Opposition Leader Richard Marles in Geelong. Nice to see you both this morning. Richard, your leader, he has a problem with detail.
Oh, that's absolutely not right. Look, this is not a pop quiz. This is an election campaign. We're not trying to elect a competitor for Sale of the Century. We're electing a Prime Minister. And you know, Scott Morrison, he's got a 3-point plan for everything. He goes missing, he makes excuses, he blames everyone else. We've got plans for the future. We've got plans in relation to the NDIS. Anthony grew up in a household with an invalid mother and he doesn't need any lectures from anyone about what we need to do with the NDIS. The NDIS is a shadow today of the system that people hoped and aspired for it at the time that it was created.
But Richard, it goes to that, the fact that he has such a personal
and he's got plans in relation to that.
This personal connection, as you say, in regards to that, I don't know, I reckon detail is his kryptonite. And it's not just yesterday, it happened to him Monday, it happened to him Tuesday as well, just this week.
It's not a pop quiz. We've got policies on our website.
So hang on, so what do you mean by that when you say it's not a pop quiz? Detail's not important, is that what you're saying?
Because it's at the end of the day, this is a contest about ideas. And when we're talking about the NDIS, the issue there is that people with a disability are no longer in the centre of the system. The system is failing them. It's not being properly funded, and it is a shadow of what it used to be. And under an Albanese Labor government, we are going to return it to what the hopes and aspirations were for it when it was first created. That's what this is about. And Anthony knows that better than anyone else, and Anthony is absolutely committed to doing that better than anyone else. And if we elect Anthony Albanese as the Prime Minister of this country, we will see change to the NDIS, as we will see wages get going, as we will see more affordable childcare. We will have a plan for the future. Scott Morrison has only got 3 points in relation to everything. Goes missing, makes excuses, blames everyone else.
Okay,
and there aren't any policies that he's putting forward.
Does Richard make a point
that is the difference here.
Pete, does Richard have a point there that the aspiring PM, the PM of our country, does not need to be across every single detail?
Well, Ellie, I've never seen that before in Kevin Rudd or Julia Gillard, not even Mark Latham. I haven't seen a Labor leader like this before, and it goes to the competency, and it goes to the question that people really have in their minds at the moment: is it worth the risk of changing the government, changing what we've got? The economy is going well compared to almost any other country in the world. There are obviously headwinds. Inflation's an issue overseas, and that impacts us here in Australia as well. And are you going to elect somebody that is not up to the job? I think Australians have great doubts and growing doubts in relation to Anthony Albanese, but it's not just us. Look at the front pages of the papers today. It's Anthony Albanese's own Labor colleagues who are questioning whether or not he's up to the job. He is a huge risk, and I think Australians are weighing that up at the moment. And why would you risk what we've got in our country at the moment to a complete unknown? And frankly, somebody who's demonstrating on a daily basis that he's not up to the task.
Well, Richard, Mr Albanese made the point last night that no one likes a reporter's gotcha questions. And look, that's probably fair. Look, a lot of people probably agree with him. He didn't know the NDIS 6 points. But it was so poorly handled when he was under that pressure yesterday.
Well, I just don't agree with that. And at the end of the day, what you get with Scott Morrison is the certainty of a Prime Minister who is going to go missing when the time gets tough.
Yeah, but we're talking about Anthony Albanese right now, Richard. We're talking about your leader right now. Do you think yesterday was a good look?
What you get with Anthony Albanese is the most experienced person in Australian politics. What you get with Anthony Albanese is a man who was the infrastructure minister for 6 years, and in that time built more roads and was responsible for the creation of more infrastructure in this country than any infrastructure minister ever. He was the person who set up Infrastructure Australia. What you get with Anthony Albanese is a man who is going to take responsibility, who is actually going to stand up in the difficult moments. That is in complete contrast to the certainty of what you will get with Scott Morrison, and that is a guy who goes missing. A guy who claims credit for everything on the good days, but when there is a difficult moment, you can guarantee he'll make an excuse and blame someone else.
All right, I want to talk about this too this morning. Peter, there are warnings that the Prime Minister of the Solomon Islands is likely to install a strong-arm Chinese force to cement his hold on power. This is from an opposition MP. How likely is that, and what would your response to that be?
Well, Ali, obviously the deal that has been signed between China and the Solomon Islands allows for a security presence on the Solomon Islands. That's the whole basis of the agreement. President Sogavare has been very clear that he's not going to allow a military base or that presence to be there, and we take him at his word. So, look, I mean, in terms of the Solomon Islands, we want nothing more than a continued strong friendship relationship, and President Sogavare, in the run-up to the agreement that he signed with the Chinese leadership, didn't have a bad word to say about Australia. He's not saying that he doesn't trust Australia or that he's unhappy with the relationship. Quite the opposite, in fact. But the Chinese operate by a very different rule than we do. We've seen that in Africa and elsewhere, and the presence of a security force within the Solomon Islands is a key aspect of the agreement that they've signed. So,
but PM, even just yesterday, when he was talking about, he didn't name Australia, but it was sort of assumed he was talking about Australia and the US, saying that you're treating the Solomon Islands like kindergartens running around with guns. So, I mean, that language has changed.
How to escape the heat if you don't have an air conditioner.
It's smaller than a lunchbox, cools any room within 3 minutes, and uses 98.7% less energy than your AC. It was invented by a former ASA engineer from Adelaide, and it's now taking Australia by storm. Steve designed this device after a citywide power outage left him.
Well, obviously that's not the case. I mean, we've got troops there at the moment. We've got Australian Federal Police officers there. They've been there for months trying to not just, it's a problem for many countries right across.
It is Mother's Day on Sunday. Breakfast in bed.
This show yesterday when he seemed a little bit miffed about Ali's line of questioning.
You want to be the next Prime Minister. You want to run the country. Shouldn't you be across your briefs?
I am, Ali. I am. Stop reading from the Liberal Party notes that they send through to people all of the time, Ali. This is just an absurd...
Federal police and government regulators have raided the offices of one of Australia's biggest tech companies, WiseTech, in relation to a suspected insider trading plot. The founding chief executive, Richard White, is at the centre of the investigation. Here's our finance editor, Chris Kohler.
The timing is important here. Richard White stood down as...
Today, crash carnage in Melbourne. A motorcyclist and a car collide in the city's west, taking Victoria's road deaths to alarming heights.
Police patrol gone wrong. A Sydney officer in a serious condition after losing control of his car. Details from Parramatta.
Royal ultimatum. Prince Andrew agrees to leave the Royal Lodge on one condition.
Bomb backlash. Queenslanders left in the dark as the Weather Bureau's new system fails its first major test.
Runway revenge. Nicole Kidman hits the catwalk, showing Keith Urban what he's missing.
And we sit down with Oscar winner Emma Stone as she embarks on a bizarre new role. Today, Tuesday, the 28th of October, 2025.
From 9 News, this is Today with Carl and Sarah.
Good morning to you all and welcome to your news today. Coming up, Donald Trump boasts a perfect MRI scan amid speculation surrounding his health. Plus, the Prime Minister issues a thinly veiled warning to China over flares fired in the Pacific. And a Taylor Swift superfan puts a spooky spin on the singer's brand new album ahead of Halloween.
Love those decorations. Well, first up, King Charles has been heckled by a member of the public as he greeted well-wishers on a royal visit today.
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew? Have you asked the police to cover up for Andrew?
Got a bit heated, didn't it? The questions come as pressure mounts on his disgraced brother, Prince Andrew, to move out of the Royal Lodge. Let's bring in Europe correspondent Mimi Becker, who joins us from London. Mimi, good to see you this morning. Was there any response from His Majesty? Good morning, Sarah. Well, as you saw there, King Charles took it literally in his stride. He kept walking and shaking hands with members of the public. It comes as Prince Andrew has reportedly agreed to give up the Royal Lodge and move out of the 30.
What happens if my dad starts Tai Chi tomorrow?
How old is your father?
He is 56.
Oh, perfect. By the end of September, you won't even recognize him.
But what if he hasn't worked out in years?
That's even better. Tai Chi was made specifically for beginner men, 40 plus.
Isn't the gym better?
After 50, the gym breaks you. Tai Chi heals your body and make you lose weight faster than in your 20s.
Does he need any equipment?
No, his body is enough.
Royal Lodge and move out of the 30-room mansion, but only if he and his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, are given a house each. Of course, the royal family are trying to push ahead despite the distractions, and they have announced that Princess Anne will be visiting Australia. She's often referred to as one of the hardest working royals, and she'll be visiting from next Saturday. She'll go to Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane as part of the 4-day tour.
It'd be great to have her here, Mimi. Thank you. Well, US President Donald Trump has once again refused to rule out a third presidential run, despite constitutional limits that cap presidents at 2 terms. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One en route to Japan, he also revealed he'd undergone a perfect MRI scan at Walter Reed as part of advanced testing. When he was pressed on why he had the scan, Trump said his doctor would provide more details.
The Bureau's new $4.1 million website is under fire, with thousands of residents left fuming after that wild storm across southeast Queensland. Let's go live to Today Queensland reporter Andrea Crothers in Brizzy. Andrea, what's happened?
Olivia Regano doesn't even like it. He's one of the Bureau's own meteorologists and says he's still using the old website. The issue is this overhaul came at a time when wild storms swept across southeast Queensland, cutting power to tens of thousands. One of the biggest issues people say is that the radar redesign actually made the system look weaker, particularly when it comes to those giant hailstones that were pelting the suburbs. So the Bureau has responded, saying they expect customer satisfaction to increase once people become more accustomed to it. Carl.
Andrea, thank you. A youth justice centre in Victoria will reopen early next year to combat increased youth crime and tougher bail laws. The Premier says she plans to open 30 beds in the 60-year-old Malmesbury Youth Justice Centre after the facility closed 2 years ago due to low incarceration rates. The Herald Sun has revealed the facility will have a focus on supporting inmates' education and job opportunities.
Beijing has been given a veiled warning by the Prime Minister over its behaviour in the South China Sea. Let's go live to Federal Politics reporter Emily Saunders. Emily, good to see you this morning. So last week's flare incident was raised in a face-to-face meeting by the PM.
Sarah, Anthony Albanese met with China's Premier Li at ASEAN yesterday, and while their public remarks seemed friendly enough, behind closed doors, we're told the Prime Minister did issue Beijing a caution after it fired flares at an Australian fighter jet last week. Also discussed Australia's new $13.5 billion critical minerals deal with the US, as Donald Trump prepares to make his own trade deal with China later this week.
Annalie, thank you. Barnaby Joyce has told 9 newspapers he won't join One Nation or return to the Nationals Party room this year. He plans to consider his political future with the party over summer after tensions with Nats leader David Littleproud. Senior colleagues have urged him to end speculation and decide whether he'll stay with the party.
Hollywood royalty Nicole Kidman has turned heads with a bold runway moment just weeks after her split from Keith Urban. Check out the images, incredible. Let's go live to 9 US correspondent Reed Butler in LA. Reed, good morning to you. That black gown's got people talking.
So good, Carl. Princess Di did it in 1994. Now 2025, Nicole Kidman in Chanel, proving, Carl, she don't need no man. Channeling Rita Hayworth, paying homage to the Hollywood actress in the 1946 film Gilda. Nicole Kidman was absolutely stunning at this Vogue World runway show. She even sang a song from that movie to kick things off. Check it out.
Put the blame on me, boys. Put the blame on me.
Yeah, has. So good. And how about this? Kendall Jenner, she walked after Nicole Kidman and she was wearing the same showgirl outfit that Nicole wore in Moulin Rouge in 2001. Check that out. We love to see it, Carl. So good.
No, just one more look at that dress. I mean, it's just absolutely fantastic. If we've got any more images. I mean, here we go. It's just so beautiful.
Stunning. Go, Nicole.
Brilliant. Well done, Reed. Excellent exuberation. I love your work, brother.
Microsoft is headed to the federal court after being accused of misleading millions of Australians over subscription prices. The ACCC alleging the company deceived users by suggesting they would have to upgrade their subscription for AI platform Copilot or cancel the Microsoft 365 plan altogether. In response, the tech company said it was reviewing the claim. It's a big week for international travel at Adelaide Airport, with the first ever flight from Christchurch landing last night. The brand new Air New Zealand service will offer return flights between October and March, and in a few days' time, the long-awaited return of Qantas International when the airline jets off to Auckland and on to New York. Time is ticking for Queensland teachers, handed a final pay deal from the Crisafulli government with a vote due by Friday. If rejected, the dispute could head to arbitration for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The offer includes pay rises, bonuses and a new safety task force to tackle classroom violence.
Well, before we get the weather, the ultimate Taylor Swift superfan has put a spooky Halloween spin on the singer's latest album, The Life of a Showgirl.
Her Minnesota home is decked out with skeletons in bedazzled costumes, haunted takes on Swift's previous album covers, and cheeky nods to her fiancé Travis Kelce.
There you go, as one of her ex-boyfriends.
It could well be, you know. Points for trying. Anyway, let's take a look now at the weather right across the country.
A wet and significantly cooler day ahead for Brizzy, the Gold Coast, Sydney and Canberra. A fine Tuesday morning for Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth and Alice Springs.
Oh, is that at the end? Is that the end of it? Shit.
Now, tonight I can reveal that the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese...
It's time for Lefties Losing It, and it's been a while since we featured AOC in this segment.
Shit.
Now, Cameron, you've got stuck into the United Nations in your column this week. You say that it's time Australia recognise the need to unhitch our future security from the United Nations and instead embrace our true friends and allies.
Well, that's right. I mean, I think the United Nations had its place after 2 world wars, but it's not fit for purpose any longer, Shari. It's become a citadel of wokeism, but also, too, appallingly anti-Israel. And let's just call it for what it is. I mean, there were 1.5 million people starving in Gaza under Hamas in 2022, but no UN motions, no court cases, no nothing. But Israel starts to self-defend, and wow, the UN is suddenly in action. No, the hypocrisy is rank. And they've done nothing in Ukraine, nothing to stop China aggression in the South China Sea, nothing to stop the Middle Eastern problems. They moved a motion against Iran. Well, it took Israel and the US to bomb them to actually stop that nuclear threat.
Yeah,
so the UN is utterly irrelevant, other than being, as I said in my column, a circle jerk of NGOs, hangers-on and a few diplomats who think they're still relevant at the UN General Assembly.
I'd say also, I don't know why we keep turning up just to be lashed. And every time we have one of these meetings, particularly on energy or climate change, Australia is isolated and told that our coal exports are a major contributor to what is going on with global temperatures. Now, it's simply not the case. What we burn here and what we export is not. China is, and the UN picks and chooses which issue it goes after. It's been terribly unfair on Israel, but also at the same time leaving out, there's been atrocities occurring across the globe that it hasn't said a word about. So I think we can give them a miss, in my view.
And played no role in the current ending of the war, if you like, with Israel and Hamas. That was all down to the President of the United States. Now, let's have a look at this report card on the Prime Minister. Now, the Centre for Public Integrity has given Albanese an F on transparency, an F for fail. And it says the government has failed on 6 of 7 key fields, including secrecy, jobs for mates.
In this bulletin, the Prime Minister raises concerns over a recent military incident in a meeting with China's Premier. The government rules out giving tech companies free rein to mine content for AI models. And in golf, Australia beats the US to take out the international Crown Teams event in South Korea. With the latest from the SBS newsroom, I'm Camille Bianchi. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has met with Chinese Premier Li Qiang during the ASEAN meeting in Malaysia. He described their talks as positive. The meeting was held a week after the federal government criticised China for releasing 2 flares against an Australian military plane over the South China Sea, while Beijing has accused Australia of intruding on its airspace. Mr Albanese says he raised the issue with Mr Li.
He heard the message very directly. I'm not here to report in on what meetings on what people say when I have meetings. I'm accountable for what I say, and I made the position directly clear that this was an incident of concern for Australia.
Coalition leader Susan Lee has raised concerns about the government-appointed CFMEU administrator during question time on Monday. It follows reports in 9 newspapers that Mark Irving has dismissed anti-corruption teams hired to investigate wrongdoing by the construction union. The union was forced into administration by the Labor government last year after reports it was infiltrated by criminals and underworld figures. When asked by Ms Lee if the government still has confidence in Mr Irving, the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Amanda Rishworth, defended his performance.
This is very difficult work. This is difficult work, and I have spoken with the administrator on numerous occasions about just how difficult this work is. And for him, he is absolutely committed to clean out this union.
Former Nationals Party leader Barnaby Joyce has refused to join colleagues at a net zero policy meeting today. The regional party is reviewing its commitment to net zero emissions by 2050. But Mr Joyce believes his colleagues must abandon the policy without compromise. Speaking from Parliament House, he repeated his opposition to the net zero emissions goal.
I'm not going to attend any party room that believes in net zero because I'm adamantly against net zero. I think it's hurting poor people. It is sending small business into insolvency at a time of absolute stress on Australia, where we see even the Japanese Prime Minister today talking about the threats to Australia from such things as the rise of a totalitarian regime. We should have the capacity to defend ourselves, and that's going to be made incredibly hard from what has been happening by the path to so-called net zero.
Mr Joyce has reportedly been speaking with One Nation about possibly defecting to its ranks, but he says nothing has been locked in yet. In September, the net zero policy also caused issues within the Liberal Party, with then frontbencher Andrew Hastie ultimately resigning from the frontbench. The Albanese government has ruled out giving tech giants free rein to mine creative content for training artificial intelligence models. Australian artists previously raised concerns around copyright of their artwork being violated by AI after an interim report by the Productivity Commission in August proposed tech companies be allowed to have copyright exemptions to use the content to train their models. Tom Solston from Digital Rights Watch told SBS, while the government's decision to scrap the text and data mining exemption is welcome, It should not stop with professional creatives and should also cover Australian social media content, private information and biometric data.
As individuals, we still control that data. So it's important that we're allowed to say, I don't want this to be part of an AI training thing or used for something that I don't want it to be used for.
The federal government will include NuvaRing, a contraceptive vaginal ring, in the pharmaceutical benefits scheme from November. Under the PBS, women now only need to pay $31.60 per script, and that price drops again to $25 from the 1st of January. Assistant Health Minister Rebecca White says the government will also lower the prices of other contraceptives.
We're also going to make it easier for them to access IUDs and implants, making sure they've got access to long-acting reversible contraceptives, making sure they've got choice when it comes to birth control, and making sure they can do that affordably. This will save on average women about $400, and making sure they can access choice when it comes to their reproductive health needs.
To sport now, and in golf, Team Australia has won the LPGA Tour's biennial International Crown Teams event in South Korea. The Australians defeated the US team, clinching the title after Minjee Lee and Hannah Green won their respective singles matches against Angela Yin and Yealimi No. The title was sealed when Green secured victory in the second singles match at the 17th hole. Minjee Lee says it feels great to achieve this victory.
I finished first and then I saw Hannah's hole and then obviously we were done after that. So it was really lovely. I mean, I'm so happy that I could do it with these girls, and it was just a lot of fun this whole week, and playing match play is something different and we don't really get to do it too often. So I think we all kind of had a really fun week.
And those are the latest headlines from the SBS Newsroom.
SBS Audio is supported by advertising.
And the latest on the gold price. But first, to working remotely, where the pandemic forced a record number of people to work from home. The ABS estimates around 53% at the peak in 2020. And while that's eased back to around 36% over the last 2 years, it's still about a third of employed people. And it comes as some employers push for workers to return to the office. But a landmark legal win this week by a bank
How this guy talks about the money, finances in the bank, central bank.
employee against returning to the office has highlighted the challenges and responsibilities of both the employer and employee in such a policy. For more, Manaz Anguri spoke with workplace law expert at UTS, Associate Professor Giuseppe Carbetta.
I guess what doors do you think this will open for other employees in similar situations? Do you imagine more people will come forward and request working from home rights?
Oh, there's always that, people get carried away with these decisions. I think you've really got to, it may happen. We've also got proposals in the background to vary one of the major awards, the Clark's Award, which you may know about as well. But I don't think it's going to it's going to have a floodgate effect because these cases are dealt with, on their individual circumstances. I think if employers can just get used to how to deal with these processes, it shouldn't be that. I don't think it's going to be that dramatic. I think we will end up somewhere in the middle, which is
Traumatic, insanic, insane, the brain. What are we? Oh, an hour, 5 hours, 10 hours.
kind of nice, and it's great for carers. It's great for women who want to participate, and unfortunately, women do more than men, so there is that equity element as well. But if we can get like a truly hybrid situation, depending on the nature of work, okay, it has to be based on that. I don't think it's going to cause major tidal waves. No.
So how important or how significant do you think it is for employers to be able to, manage and, wrap their head around all of this, especially given how much the landscape of working has changed since COVID, and especially with modern day working in the office, things like virtual meetings and things like that? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I think that employers really need to, you can by all means have a policy, but your policy needs to be consistent with the Fair Work Act and these what we call the National Employment Standards. There's one section in those standards, but it's a fairly detailed section. You've just got to make sure that you have an avenue for protected categories, like people with disabilities, like elderly people, like carers, that you have an avenue to consider their cases individually. So you can have your broad policy, but your policy firstly can't be inconsistent with the national employment standards, can't undercut that, can't undercut those, obviously. And it should also be, it should emphasise that each case is dealt with on its merits, not, you can't have a wholesale approach. As much as you may want to, you know, one of the big arguments that I see again and again from employers, and employers are getting used to this, let's be fair, but they say, well, I don't want to set a precedent. You know, if I let this person through, it's going to be disruptive or whatever. Well, that's, you know, that's kind of not, that's not going to fly with the Commission. If a person has a legitimate reason to request a flexible work arrangement and it doesn't erode, you know, your business, so things like the way you deal with clients, your productivity, your efficiency, you know, not so much things like teamwork and that kind of thing, which sure, there are merits there, but the Commission will ask for more concrete factors. And let's remember again, employers can, if they do it correctly, they can adduce evidence and they can refuse a request on reasonable business grounds.
That's Manaz Anguri speaking with Associate Professor Giuseppe Carabetta from UTS. Let's take a closer look at the Australian share market now, which did finish flat. The S&P ASX 200 up only 0.03%, 9,032. Still, there was some movement on the ASX because the energy sector really outperformed, up by 3.2% after the oil price surged overnight. For more on the day's market action, including her take on the gold price and critical minerals, I spoke with Elizabeth Tian from Citi. Liz, so the Australian share market is still trading at close to record levels. How would you describe investor sentiment at the moment and what exactly is driving it?
So, Ricardo, it really is, I think, a little bit of a tug of war at the moment with where markets are. Obviously, Australia, US markets were virtually at all-time highs. And that really, you know, investors are trying to kind of weigh up, am I in with the AI story? Because we all know about the AI story, a lot of capital and investments, you know, the Magnificent Seven doing, you know, their share prices have been rocketing, they keep going up and up and up. So that's one side of this kind of tug of war. But on the other side, we've got, you know, questions around things like fiscal debt, you know, US, fiscal debt's going up, inflation, what does that mean? What's the Fed's going to do? And of course, the tariffs. So it's almost like markets are whipsawing. You know, on Monday, it's all about tariff wars. If, you know, on Friday, Trump had a tweet and then 2 days later, oh no, that's okay. Let's go back to AI. We're hearing, you know, a lot of these companies announce and, you know, the US reporting season so far has been pretty good. They've been beating expectations. So markets continuing to go up. But because valuations are quite high, especially in the US, markets are kind of really priced for perfection. So we all know, you know, at the next tweet, any sound of bad news, you know, there's a big pivot to where investors are looking.
Okay, so you mentioned AI. There's another theme that happened, especially this week, and that's gold, right? Gold seeing big swings in recent days. So too oil. More recently, oil up today after the US announced sanctions on Russia's biggest producers. What's your take on these commodities?
And that's exactly right, Ricardo. You know, gold is really tied up into this big macro geopolitical story, you know, tied into the US fiscal debt and the run up in gold. You know, it's been an extraordinary run, especially even more so the last couple of months. And it's because of questions around not just the US fiscal debt, but central banks around the world. You know, we've looked at France, we look at Japan and obviously the US. So, you know, we're hearing words like debasement. Are people kind of hedging away from just holding US dollars, US treasuries, wanting to hold gold? We've seen all those lines, you know, people lining up for gold bars. And we think, we were quite bullish on gold, but just recently, especially with a very recent sell-off, that's huge volatility, volatility not seen in decades. We've kind of pared back our gold call. We think there could be a bit of consolidation at around these $4,000 gold price per ounce. Now, a couple of things that investors need to look at re-gold is obviously we've got some very key meetings going in the next couple of weeks, geopolitically. Trump, is he going to meet Xi? All these negotiations, is that going to really temper down a lot of this geopolitical talks and tariff wars, and then give a bit of, it's a lot of nervousness around the markets. So watch out for that in terms of the gold price. And then obviously on oil. So we were expecting oil to trade around $60 a barrel, always obviously went down to those levels. It's jumped up on the recent announcement. Now, regarding oil, we think that it really is, again, tied back to geopolitics. If Trump can kind of negotiate a deal faster between Ukraine and Russia, we could see oil trade back lower to even around 50 to 55 US dollars a barrel.
Now, speaking of geopolitics, it's not just oil and gold, it's also critical minerals, rare earths, right? This is a long question, but I want to put it into context for our audience, and I'm keen to get your take on the sector. Shares have surged a lot in critical minerals in the lead up to that Australia-US supply agreement earlier this week, but have recently pulled back. A lot of it is based on Australia becoming a growing supplier. Interestingly today, we saw an RBA research paper was released today, but compiled before this agreement between Australia and the US. So that's important to point out. But it says it's cooled some of those expectations, saying that the outlook is uncertain and depends on a range of factors like the speed of the global energy transition, the take-up of different technologies like EVs, global prices, and the competitiveness of global production, because you've got the likes of China, India, and Brazil also in this space. So what's your view on the sector, especially in light of the stellar performance of so many of these rare earths players or those in critical minerals? Because the other thing is, while the new deal between Australia and the US secures supply and some investment, like the RBA pointed out in its note today, projects will still take years to come to life.
Absolutely, Ricardo. So to give a bit of context, if we're going to really, talk about rare earths first, China began their whole look at the whole supply chain, where, the mining plus the refining back in 1980s. And Deng Xiaoping apparently in 1992 said, the country is going to focus on rare earths. So they've been looking at this for decades. They've been building out the mining and the refining, and obviously they dominate with 90% of refining, around 90% are dominated by China, and same thing with magnets. So they're decades into this. The other thing that I guess investors need to also look at is the reason China has been so strong in rare earths is because the business itself is quite a high pollution processing, and this was kind of outsourced in a way to China, who was prepared to take this on. And obviously now countries like the US, Australia, if we're going to refine it and we've got these, this polluting refinery, what are the regulations we have in place? How do we, it's quite a complicated process. So obviously we saw the announcement earlier this week. There was a little bit of a pullback since that announcement. There's also the different grades in refining in rare earths. So you can go to the very, very refined spectrum, which China once again is, dominates globally in. And that very refined end of rare earths, I believe it's 99.999%, but, don't quote me, that feeds into the semiconductor space. And with the semiconductor space, when you've got less refined rare earths, that can go into things like EVs, but it's that very refined rare earths that's needed for things like semiconductors, which obviously feeds into this whole AI race between the US and China as well. So countries obviously scrambling around this. But I think it is a very, it's not a 12-month, 6-month thing. Experts are saying it can be 5-10 years before there is real catch up.
Okay. And finally, what are you telling your clients right now? Where do you see the opportunities for investors?
Oh, look, I think, as we were saying before, markets are sitting on quite a high valuation, but there is the whole AI story. US is in the middle of reporting season. You've got some companies, selling off like overnight with Netflix, etc. The thing for investors to keep a watch out on, obviously we haven't had a lot of economic data come out of the US because because the government's got this lockdown at the moment. So we do have the CPI numbers coming out of the US next week. That's going to be very key. Some of the tailwinds is not only AI, but it's also obviously when we start getting this data back from the US, the markets are pricing in a couple of rate cuts by the Federal Reserve, and that's going to be a tailwind obviously for markets. But it will be interesting, all eyes, I think, on the possible meeting between Trump and Xi, whether they can kind of temper this down or it actually escalates. Don't forget, overnight, Trump has said, well, we're going to look at export controls now on software to China, on aircraft parts to China. So is it going to escalate or temper down?
That's Elizabeth Tian there from Citi, and she wraps up the podcast for this Thursday. Don't forget, if you enjoy it, to give it a rating or review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Click that subscribe button. I'm away tomorrow. Stephanie Youssef will fill in, and I'll see you on Monday.
This SBS On The Money You're listening to SBS On The Money with Ricardo Gonçalves.
Hello and welcome to the On The Money podcast. It's Friday the 24th of October. I'm Stephanie Youssef filling in for Ricardo Gonçalves. Today, the ASX closed 0.15% lower. I'll have a bit more on that and what the markets are expecting ahead of next week's CPI figures a little later. But first, new research from the superannuation peak body ASFA shows fewer Australians are now relying on the pension to fund their retirement, with the average super fund passing $172,000 for the first time. For more on this, I spoke with ASFA's CEO, Mary Delahunty.
These recent stats are really a combination of three things coming together. Most importantly, this is the super system doing exactly what it was meant to do. Firstly, we've had strong investment returns. So super funds have delivered between 9 and 10% over the last 3 financial years on default options. Quite extraordinary. Secondly, the super guarantee is finally reaching 12%. So remember, it started at 3% in 1992. It was stuck at 9% for years, and it's really reaching a number that represents maturity now. And third, the system itself is maturing. So now we've got workers who've been contributing for 30 plus years. The result is that the super system has generated around $1 trillion in additional household savings that Australians wouldn't otherwise have. And this isn't luck. This is the system working exactly as it was supposed to.
Fewer Australians are relying on the age pension now. What does this say about how far this retirement system has come, and what will it look like in the future?
This fewer people relying on the age pension is actually the historic shift we've been hoping for. Super is increasingly becoming the main source of retirement income rather than the age pension. So a 30-year-old today with $30,000 in super and earning a median wage, they will retire with $610,000. That's above $595 needed for a comfortable retirement. So it really is an incredible effort from a system and something that the country should be very proud of.
Big differences in super balances across the country. What's behind those regional gaps?
The regional gaps come down to 2 main factors: who lives where and what they earn. Super's a reflection of your working life. So mining towns like Newcastle have average balances around $199,000 because mining pays well, so higher super contributions. Coastal towns like Victor Harbour, they also have higher balances, but for different reasons. They're the retirement destinations full of people who've accumulated super over early careers. And then younger towns like Darwin have lower average balances because younger workers haven't had time to build up their balances yet. Even in Sydney, so even in city capitals, the variations are huge, from 378,000 in the likes of Wentworth down to 75,000 in Blaxland. So those differences reflect income levels and the reality of how different communities age and earn.
The research shows that the gender gap is shrinking, but what's still holding back women from catching up completely?
The good news is that women now hold 43.6% of super assets, up from 41.9% 5 years ago. So we're heading in the right direction, albeit at a glacial pace. But gaps remain because at ages 60 to 64, men average about 396,000, while women average around 313,000. Obviously, there are a few drivers. The main culprits being career breaks for caring responsibilities, and then women tending to work part-time, and then women being paid lower. So it's a wicked problem, but recent changes are making real differences. So superannuation on paid parental leave is coming. We've abolished the $450 monthly threshold that excluded many part-time workers, and the Listo tax offset is expanding to cover workers. We know that those statistics, women are overrepresented in those groups. They will make meaningful differences, and now we just have to keep attacking the drivers of that gap.
There's been a lot of discussion recently about economic uncertainty. Super balances are at record highs. How confident can Australians be that those savings are safe if markets take a downturn?
It's certainly volatile times, but superannuation is a long-term investment. It's built to weather short-term storms. So markets will go up and down, but think about your investment over the 30 years. Superannuation funds have delivered average returns of about 7.5% year on year, even accounting for the GFC and the COVID crashes. So the key is that younger workers actually can benefit from downturns because they can buy assets when they're cheap. Super can act really counter-cyclical that way. Their regular contributions take advantage of what we call dollar cost averaging over time. So for those closer to retirement, most funds automatically dial down the risk as you age. Remember also that super funds are heavily regulated, so they're professionally managed and diversified across thousands of investments globally. Your super isn't sitting in one stock or one property, spread across the global economy.
This research also shows younger people are on track for stronger retirements. What advice would you give to people just starting out with super?
The most important thing you can do for your retirement is, no matter what age you are, engage with your super early. Don't wait until you're 50. And it can be achingly boring if you're young to think about retiring, but you can make some meaningful differences. Make sure you have one account. 78% of Australians now just have one, which is great, but check you're not paying fees on multiple accounts if you don't want to be. Check your insurance because you may need insurance at some point in time. It's a good way to get insurance through your super, but you might be paying for cover that you don't need, or you might not have enough. And then consider extra contributions if you can. For many people, even $20 a week in their 20s can mean tens of thousands extra at retirement thanks to compound returns. Check your investment option matches your risk profile, and then you can do that in a step-by-step sort of way. And then you've taken some real actions towards making sure you've got a good balance at retirement for dignity as you stop work.
That was ASFA CEO Mary Delahunty. Now to the Australian share market, which fell 0.15% to 9,019 points. Despite that, 6 of the 11 sectors finished in the black, led by information technology stocks. For more on what drove the market today, including how investors are feeling ahead of Donald Trump's meeting with Xi Jinping next week, I spoke with ANZ's head of FX research, Mahjabeen Zaman. The ASX is in the red after a rise in early trading. What's driving the market today?
Look, I think US-China relations once again are taking center stage in financial markets ahead of several critical dates. We saw this morning that President Trump and Xi seem to have confirmed a meeting to take place sometime next week. At the margin, you could think that's kind of positive. But then, I think as the multiple headlines around Trump and his dealings with other countries breaking apart. We saw another headline around Canada that seems to have fallen in terms of tariff negotiations. I think there's a push and pull that's driving markets. At the end of the day, when Trump and Xi meet next week, now that summit, the APEC summit, precedes the November 10th deadline, marking the end of the current 90-day truce on tariffs for U.S. and China. So if there is no, deal or no extension of that, you're going to see U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods back to 145%, reigniting trade tensions.
So everyone's looking forward to next week's CPI figures, which could influence the RBA's next move. What's the market expecting?
Look, we are expecting trimmed mean inflation of 0.9% Q-on-Q, headline inflation of 1.2% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. Now, of course, our trimmed mean outcome does have some upside risk. But if we do get that 0.9% Q-on-Q, this would really mean that the 2-quarter trimmed mean pulse will analyze around or marginally even above the top of the RBA's 2 to 3% target band. Now, we think that if that's the real social price, shall we get Chair Powell to remain?
How increase the markets like for shoes, expensive jackets, necklaces, rings, and other items that are high priority. How do we live like that? What the percentage of taxes? How are we going? Explain it to me, please.
Fundamentals remain solid.
Look, gold prices retraced sharply after over a 20+% rally since September. A little bit of, you could argue, headline risks around the commentary between US versus the rest of the world. Some positives, some negatives there. And also broadly, you would see some investors maybe taking money off the table there. But ETF holdings, of course, fell quite sharply. Furthermore, we see a little bit of the US dollar strength coming back in, which is also then weighed on the gold price as well. We think that this price fall is more of a healthy correction than a new reversal of the uptrend. We do see the structural factors are still supportive, such as US macroeconomic challenges. They still look like they're intensifying. There's no evidence that the government shutdown is going to end anytime soon. The longer that drags on, the greater the risk to US economic activity. In addition to that, we, as I spoke about earlier, we expect the Fed to ease rates over the next few meetings. And at the margin, this will be supportive for gold. Physical demand also remains pretty strong despite the price rise. We saw Swiss gold exports rising by 38% month on month in September.
That was Mahshabeen Zaman, Head of FX Research at ANZ. That's all for today. Thank you for joining me. Ricardo will be back next week.
Okay, we gotta go. We're here.
Effective Union Movement Government Australia News, Google search. Recent news indicates a mixed picture for the Australian Union Movement, with recent government reforms leading to a recent increase in union membership, particularly among young workers. However, challenges persist, including ongoing disputes over policies like a 4-day workweek and opposition from employer groups regarding productivity concerns. The Australian Council of Trade Unions, ACTU, has also become involved in broader policy discussions, such as advocating for tax reforms to improve housing affordability. Recent developments and government actions. Increased union membership. From August 2022 to August 2024, union membership grew by nearly 200,000, with a notable 53% increase among 15 to 24-year-olds. Secure jobs, better pay reforms. These reforms have contributed to increased multi-employer bargaining agreements, with 247,500 workers covered by such agreements in June 2025. Government support. Some union goals, like including gender equality and Fair Work Commission decisions, have been incorporated into the Fair Work Act. Challenges and ongoing debates. 4-day work week. The ACTU is pushing for a 4-day week, but employer groups argue it would hurt productivity and investment. The government has indicated it has no plans to adopt the proposal, though it is open to discussion. Productivity. Some business groups claim the union movement is pushing populist policies that go against efforts to improve productivity. Corruption concerns. Recent corruption claims against the CFMEU have created a negative perception of the movement for some. Political clashes. There are ongoing tensions between unions and opposition parties over policies like multi-employer bargaining and potential new anti-racketeering laws. Other union activities. Housing affordability. The ACTU has joined housing advocates in calling for changes to tax breaks for property investors to address the housing affordability crisis. Work from home. Some unions are arguing for a presumed right to work from home for certain roles, while employer groups are pushing back on policies that could guarantee overtime or penalty rates for remote workers. Union movement to push for 4-day week despite criticism. The 12th of August 2025, save articles for later. Add articles to your saved list and come back to them anytime. The federal government has shrugged off the union movements. The Sydney Morning Herald. Unions have delivered another populist anti-productivity thought bubble. The 12th of August 2025, unions have offered up another populist anti-productivity thought bubble with a proposal that employers must bridge a 4-day week with reduced woe. Australian Industry Group. Media release. Private sector union membership at record low, despite Albanese trying to boost union power. Senator Michaelia Cash. Senator the Honourable Michaelia Cash. Shadow Attorney General. Shadow Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Senate. Senator for Western Australia. The 10th of December 2024. Private sector union membership at record low, despite Albanese trying to boost union power. Private sector employees across Australia are Joint media release. Albanese government spin, secrecy and broken promises exposed at Senate estimates. Senator Michaelia Cash. Senator the Honourable Michaelia Cash. Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs. Leader of the Opposition in the Senate. Senator for Western Australia. Senator the Honourable Anne Ruston. Shadow Minister for Health and Aged Care. Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Senate. Senator for South Australia. Joint media release. The 13th of October 2025. Albanese government spin, secrecy and broken promises exposed at Senate estimates. A week of Senate estimates hearings has revealed Australians are paying the price for a government that talks big and delivers little. From national security to the cost of living, from health to integrity, the Albanese government has turned promises into failures and transparency into secrecy. The Albanese's government's bad decisions and wrong priorities were also on full display. Leader of Opposition in the Senate, Senator Michaelia Cash said, the Albanese government has been exposed as a government that would prefer to keep Australians in the dark about issues of vital importance. The ISIS brides cover-up was finally exposed through the estimates process after the government spent weeks denying all knowledge of the status of this cohort, Senator Cash said. Deputy Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, Senator Anne Ruston said, the deceptive nature of this government has been exposed time and again, as has their poor decision-making, ideological obsessions and broken promises. ISIS brides cover-up revealed. The Albanese government knew a cohort of ISIS brides and their children were coming back to Australia months ago but refused to tell the public. They knew as early as June yet kept Australians in the dark despite repeated media stories and questions from the opposition. It wasn't until Senate estimates last week that the government finally admitted 2 ISIS brides and their 4 children were back in Australia. But the Albanese government showed their contempt for the Australian people through their failure to answer even the most basic factual questions about their ISIS brides, and the government refuses to reveal how many more are returning or when they are coming back. Labor left Australians hanging in 000 chaos. The coalition exposed shocking new details about the Optus 000 outage and Labor's failure to act. It was revealed Optus emailed the Albanese government the day before the outage went public, warning of the looming crisis. Yet no one in government alerted emergency services or the Australian public. Australians were left unable to call for help, and Labor sat on its hands. The government's attempt to bury the email and downplay its own inaction shows a disturbing lack of accountability and leadership in a life and death situation. Prime Minister's Medicare lies exposed. Labor's credibility on Medicare gets weaker and weaker by the day. Department officials revealed that not only will millions of Australians still have to pay with their credit card as well as their Medicare card to see a GP, but out-of-pocket costs will continue to go up. As Australians continue to pay record high costs to see the doctor, the department says they won't feel a change from the government's bulk billing investment for at least 4 years after this term of government. The Prime Minister promised Australians they would see a GP for free, but instead they will continue to pay more than they ever have before. Labor breaks decades of fiscal discipline. Treasury officials confirmed in Senate estimates that there are no quantifiable fiscal rules guiding Labor's budget. This reconfirms what the coalition and leading economists have warned for months. Labor has thrown out the rule book and are on a spending spree. By scrapping measurable fiscal rules, the Treasurer has broken long-standing norms of budget discipline, giving himself a blank check. RBA warns inflation may be hotter than forecast. Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock told Senate estimates that inflation for the September quarter could be hotter than expected. Warning of upside risks to the bank's own forecasts. The admission confirms what Australians already know: Labor's cost of living crisis is far from over. The governor's evidence shows that despite the Treasurer's spin about inflation being under control, price pressures remain stubborn across services and construction. For families and small businesses already under strain, this is yet another sign that Labor's high spending, high taxing agenda is keeping inflation higher for longer. PM intervenes in Chalmers super tax debacle. Treasury officials confirmed that the Prime Minister's office has stepped in on the government's troubled $3 million super tax plan. A measure that remains unlegislated more than 2 years after it was announced. Under questioning, Treasury's Diane Brown admitted the Treasury has been modelling potential changes to the policy and that conversations with the Prime Minister's office had taken place. This follows former Treasury Secretary Ken Henry, former Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe and Labour luminaries Paul Keating and Bill Kelty all airing concerns about Labour's new tax, false narrative on spending, debt and deficit. Treasury officials confirmed that the government has broken its own fiscal strategy. Labour failed to bank the majority of revenue upgrades in 2024-25, as promised. And government expenditure increases over the forward estimates just as debt too. GDP rises, contrary to their stated policy. Clip, https://www.youtube.com. https://www.youtube.com/watch. V equals archivactive_I. Clip, https://www.youtube.com/watch. V equals Zomitavadig 4UW. Labour to officially rack up $1 trillion of debt in 2026.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Get out!
In fact, I think she did use the word
Why do
impossible
you do that?
in the 4-year period of the forward estimates.
Why do you
And of
do
course,
that?
as we've gone through time, years have dropped off at the end.
Why do you do that?
At the beginning, and we've added years at the end, and it's just the forward estimates. The one other thing that I would mention is that at the same time, over that same time period, the estimates variations on the payment side of the budget have cost the budget a little over $100 billion.
If you have a property or are looking to break into the market, you need to download this app. The app is called Aussie and it's a game.
Well, we've all heard of the loyalty tax, but did you know it could be costing you more than $800 a year on one bill alone?
It's a lot, isn't it? New data has revealed the cost of sticking with the same health fund for too long. And money expert Joel Gibson is here to tell us how to save. Joel, it's expensive.
It is, and this number really jumped out at me because it was just one bill. There's 15 million health insurance policies in the country, and they looked at the data and found that people who'd been with their health fund for over 10 years were paying average premiums that were $828 a year more than people who'd recently switched.
Why
so
do
29% more.
Why do Australians stick to the same bills?
I think with health insurance particularly, it's because it's complicated, right? So when you look at the bills that we tend to shop around on and the ones that we're a bit afraid to shop around on, that's the wrong graphic, but we'll get the right one up there in a minute. The bills that we really struggle with are health insurance particularly because it's complex. We get this thing called decision paralysis when we sit down and try and compare our health insurance, and we see so many different things we have to make, little mini decisions we have to make.
A lot of those are set and forget, right? Set and forget. You don't even worry about it. You just pay it when it comes.
Yeah, well,
but that's costing.
Interesting that car insurance is pretty good there. Half of us have compared our car insurance in the past year, so we're doing the right thing when it comes to car insurance and to a lesser extent electricity and gas. But it's really the health insurance that we're not comparing and switching often enough. And about 5% of people a year, I think, actually switch health insurance. That's way too low. And what it does is it plays into health funds who want to just put the price up because they know that people aren't going to switch.
Well, the issue with health insurance, of course, is the various things that it covers, right? So the list is very, very long. If you were to work through that, it takes significant time as well.
It does. And I think it's unnecessarily complicated, unfortunately. It's that way because of extensive government regulation. We could simplify it somehow, make it easier for people.
Yeah.
But one thing you can do is you can look at gold, silver and bronze level cover. Every policy now is in one of those categories or basic. And if you're looking at a silver policy, just look at other silver policies and you're going to be pretty similar when you switch across. If it's hundreds of dollars cheaper, that's an easy switch and an easy
A lot of
change.
people are getting their insurance bills at this time of year, right? Mum just got hers for, I think it was Suncorp for property, house and property in Cairns, and it's gone up a little bit, but not too bad. So some of them are pretty competitive at the moment.
Well, that's a good news story. You don't hear many of those, especially in Queensland. You know, this is a big report from Compare the Market about insurance increases, which is...
And in 4 years.
Come on, let's bring in John Keogh, economic...
I mean, most people my age don't realize it. AI will create more millionaires in 5 years than the internet did in 20. It can already build...
Well, we've all heard of the loyalty tax, but did you know it could be costing you more than $800 a year on one bill alone?
It's a lot, isn't it? New data has revealed the cost of sticking with the same health fund.
Well, national leaders are calling for Barnaby Joyce to decide once and for all if he's in or out of the party. There is Barnaby, I think, this morning, having a little run, looking very athletic, -1 in Canberra. Look at him, sweating up a storm. Maybe it was file vision. Let's bring in former Nationals leader and member for Riverina, Michael McCormack, who joins us live in Canberra. Chilly morning there.
Me running this morning, Carl.
Yeah, was Barnaby out with you or not really?
No. We weren't running together this morning. Maybe tomorrow.
I can never work out if you guys are on or off.
Oh, look, we're always mates. I mean, the National Party are like one big happy family. We have our arguments generally in public, and then we get on with it. But no, a lot of families, but all families do that, don't they? You know that, Carl?
Yeah. Well, no doubt. But do you lay awake thinking of him all night?
No. I think of other things at night, not Barnaby.
Right.
That'd be a bit weird, wouldn't it?
No, but you guys are strange. Why don't you just show him the barn door, Michael?
Oh, no, you can't do that. I mean, Barnaby's a member of the Nationals. He's been elected as a member of the Nationals, and he owes it to the National Party people and indeed his electorate to continue to serving with the Nationals until such time as he's ending his this term of Parliament. And, I think that's what you need to do when people are prepared to hand out for you and they're prepared to don your yellow T-shirt with "I'm backing Barnaby" on the back. I mean, he needs to continue to serve and sit with the Nationals.
Well, I guess it's that future that is unknown. The good news is Barnaby won't decide until next year. He'll take all summer to work out if he's staying with the Nats. So you guys only have to put your future knees in a blender for another 3 months or so.
Well, the thing is, too, I've always believed that life is determined by those who turn up, and it was a shame he didn't turn up to the party room meeting yesterday. We had a good discussion about net zero. Some of the plans that Matt Canavan and Ross Goodell have put together were put to the meeting, just the initial draft plans, and a lot of work has
Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price didn't care about making false claims, defamation trial told Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, The Guardian. A Liberal senator accused of defaming the head of a large Aboriginal land council was an evasive witness who made baseless allegations and gave illogical and self-serving answers, the court has been told. Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price has been sued by Central Land Council Chief Executive, Leslie Turner, over an allegedly defamatory media release in July 2024 that claimed there had been a failed no-confidence motion against him. The release also accused Turner of unprofessional conduct by failing to help poverty-stricken Aboriginal people who were living in tin sheds. Council Chair, Matthew Palmer had earlier issued a release including the same allegedly defamatory claim, which was picked up by Nampijinpa-Price and reported by the News Corp-owned NT News and the ABC. In her closing submission at the federal court defamation trial in Darwin on Tuesday, Turner's barrister, Sue Chrysanthu SC, said the senator had sought to tarnish my client's reputation, and she has done so by repeatedly defaming him. She was told that her publication was wrong nearly immediately by the Central Land Council on the morning of the 11th of July. But she just didn't care, Chrysanthu said. She promoted and promulgated her defamation on Facebook to print journalists, with quotes through her staff in broadcast interviews, and her defamation was repeated and circulated. A theme of the senator's evidence was that she would make baseless allegations wholly uninformed by factual material, she said. As a witness, the senator was often evasive and volunteered answers that made baseless allegations, not just against my client, but also the Central Land Council. Her answers were often illogical and self-serving. At a council meeting, Palmer had discussed getting rid of Turner. While he claimed publicly there had been a motion to remove the chief executive, the council denied this through media reports. The imputations of the alleged defamatory statements were an attack on Turner's integrity, Chrysanthu said. Because there were no specifics of the alleged unprofessional conduct, readers are left to wonder what terrible thing my client did to warrant this finding. That he should be gone, she said. Nampijinpa-Price's barrister, Peter Gray SC, said the number of people who actually saw the release was not known, but was likely to be small. He also said there had been an air of unreality about Turner's evidence because he'd given highly emotive testimony about the impact of the senator's media release, but avoided entirely or notably downplayed as insignificant the obvious impacts of the Palmer release, 2 NT News articles and 4 ABC broadcasts. Plainly, Turner was aware of all those publications, but in his affidavit we submit he effectively asked the court to proceed on the fictitious or imaginary footing that they were not relevant, he said. The senator had relied on the skill and experience of her staff in preparing and checking a media release. She deliberately didn't name Turner, and she and her staff, over several days, checked and successively amended the text of the media release, Gray said. There was significant and genuine public interest in the matter, so it was legitimate for her to publish quickly as long as she took reasonable care to get it right, Gray said. Justice Michael Wheelahan has reserved his decision. Expanded state powers on fossil fuel projects and water, betrayal of Australians, nature law critics say, Australian politics, The Guardian. State governments could be given expanded powers to make decisions on fossil fuel developments under Labor's proposed overhaul of environment law, prompting shock and anger from community-based conservation organizations that fear nature protection would be weakened. The Albanese government plans to introduce its planned changes to the national law, the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation, EPBC, Act, to Parliament later this week, and has been briefing interest groups on its plans. Extracts of legislation seen by Guardian Australia show it includes provisions for state and territory governments that receive federal accreditation to make decisions about large coal mining and unconventional gas projects that affect groundwater reserves or waterways. The federal government has had explicit responsibility for decisions on fossil fuel developments that affect water resources since 2013. When the Gillard Labor government introduced what is known as the water trigger, at the behest of the independent MP Tony Windsor. 13 environment organisations including groups based in Darwin, Central Australia, the Kimberley and Far North Queensland criticised the proposed change to the water trigger and the government's plan to use the law to sign bilateral agreements with the states to streamline environmental decision-making. They said it could leave decisions in the hands of jurisdictions that have taken steps to reduce conservation laws, such as Queensland and the Northern Territory, or have weak lobbying rules. Sign up. Oh, breaking news email. The Lock the Gate Alliance's national coordinator, Carmel Flint, said a wholesale handback of environmental decision-making to state governments could lead to rural communities, farmers and traditional owners being railroaded by corporate giants, whether it's for coal mining or renewables or critical minerals. This has been sprung on the Australian people without public consultation, even as big corporations have been in close discussions with the federal government. For months, Flint said, it's a betrayal of Australians who depend on the government to protect our natural resources. The Queensland Conservation Council's director, Dave Copeman, said most major environmental campaigns that had secured wins for nature this century had relied on some form of federal accountability under the EPBC Act. The Queensland LNP government just jammed through laws exempting planning decisions on Olympic venues from all Queensland environmental and cultural heritage laws. There's no way they could be trusted with EPBC decision-making, he said. Labor's promise to overhaul the EPBC Act follows widespread criticism that the law was failing to protect nature and leading to long delays in approval decisions on industrial and other developments. Watt has said both concerns could be addressed. He has promised an accreditation process for states and territories to make decisions, and the introduction of consistent national environment standards against which proposals would be measured. Responding to the criticisms, Watt said the new legislation was long overdue and would improve federal environment law. He said changes to reduce duplication in development assessment between federal and state process had been recommended by the former consumer watchdog Graham Samuel in his 2020 review of the EPBC Act, and backed by many environment organisations. I would encourage those groups critical of the legislation to read the full bill when it is introduced into the Parliament, Watt said. The minister presented the legislation to Labor MPs on Tuesday. He told caucus he would prefer not to change the proposed legislation to get it through Parliament, but the Coalition and Greens were being lobbied by business interests and environment groups. The extracts of draft legislation show there would be exceptions to promised conservation zones, sometimes described as no-go zones, in which development is not supposed to be allowed. As reported on Monday, they also include a provision giving the Environment Minister power to approve projects at odds with nature laws if it was deemed in the national interest. Other extracts circulated on Monday outline the powers of the proposed National Environment Protection Agency. The minister would retain approval powers but delegate many decisions to officials inside the nature watchdog. The new law would allow the minister to issue protection statements to clarify what decision makers must consider in order to protect threatened species or ecological communities. Speaking with the ABC's Iron Breakfast on Tuesday, the Greens leader, Larissa Waters, said the proposed law was written for big business. She said she expected Watt to do a deal with the coalition to pass it through Parliament. The Greens want to see environment laws that work for nature, protect communities' rights, and actually don't see coal and gas and logging fast-tracked unabated. We're willing to talk to government about that, she said. The previous Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, proposed a similar change to the water trigger and received a similar response from environmentalists in 2024 before a revamp of the EPBC Act was shelved until after this year's federal election. Biodiversity is in catastrophic decline. Here are 3 ways to ensure Australia's conservation law actually works. Atticus Fleming and Andrew McIntosh, The Guardian. Australia's Parliament will soon consider proposed reforms to federal environmental laws known as the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act. Unfortunately, signals from the government suggest this may be another reform process that fails to deliver the progress we need, despite everyone agreeing that Australia's biodiversity is in catastrophic decline. When introduced, the EPBC Act was a historic reform by a Conservative government. For the first time since Federation, the Australian Parliament exercised its full suite of constitutional powers to regulate environmentally harmful actions on all tenures.
How is this government environment significance, which include threatened species like koalas, Potterus, Bendigo. What all this mean? You understanding? Excuse me, please.
10 years. The EPBC Act gave the Federal Environment Minister direct control over actions affecting matters of national environmental significance, which include threatened species like koalas, potoroos, bandicoots, swift and superb parrots, and more than 1,400 plant species, and our world and national heritage sites. Early litigation highlighted the potential of the Act. For example, a conservation group in North Queensland secured an injunction to prevent lychee farmers using large electric grids to kill spectacled flying foxes. Importantly, the Act established a framework that could evolve. Notably, it allows for regulations to be made to add new triggers, which dictate when environmentally harmful activities need approval, and to deem certain classes of actions to be within existing triggers. Sadly, the Act has failed to realize its potential. There are three main reasons for this. First, the Commonwealth bureaucracy has failed to enforce the existing laws. Actions that breach the Act have been taken by proponents without attracting any sanctions. This includes land clearing that has routinely not been referred for approval, despite having significant impacts on threatened species. Sign up to get climate and environment editor Adam Morton's Clear Air column as a free newsletter. Second, mechanisms in the Act that could have expanded its scope, and provided certainty about its scope, have not been utilized. Regulations could have been made to deem land clearing over a specified threshold as requiring approval. A climate change trigger could have been added at any time. Indeed, back in 2000. A draft climate change trigger was published by the Howard government but never enacted. Third, the exemption for native forest logging should have been phased out. Instead, it was extended. If the Howard government could propose a climate trigger in 2000, it can hardly be described as radical in 2025. The reform process appears not to be addressing any of these challenges. Unless a reset occurs, the reforms cannot deliver substantive additional environment protection. Australia's extinction rate, already one of the highest in the world, will get worse. The highest priority for the reforms must be to ensure land clearing is properly regulated. Since the Act commenced in 2000, more than 11.5 meters hectares of native forests have been cleared, including more than 3 meters hectares of remnant, intact, native vegetation. Amendments should prohibit the clearing of remnant vegetation, other than in exceptional circumstances where Parliament decides the clearing is needed for an essential project. All clearing of mature regrowth, previously cleared vegetation that has regenerated and not been disturbed for 15 to 25 years should require approval if it exceeds a specified area threshold, and any clearing should only be approved if its impacts on threatened species are fully offset through the restoration of cleared or degraded examples of the same ecosystem. We suggest 3 simple KPIs for the reform process. Within 12 months, clearing of remnant vegetation should be near zero and there should be an initial 50% reduction in mature regrowth clearing. The native forest logging exemption should be removed. And all projects likely to directly or indirectly result in 50,000 tons or more of greenhouse gas emissions a year, on average or at their peak, should trigger the Act, and all emissions from these projects should be subject to a carbon price that aligns with the aims of the Paris Agreement. If the Howard government could propose a climate trigger in 2000, it can hardly be described as radical in 2025. Unfortunately, rather than fixing the gaps in the triggers and what is regulated, the reform process has focused instead on the introduction of national standards and the creation of an Environment Protection Authority, EPA, to oversee the enforcement of the Act's requirements. Standards will be important in limiting the broad discretion that now exists when approval decisions are made. However, such standards are of limited value if the projects that pose the biggest environmental risk, such as land clearing, are not regulated. Similarly, while there is value in a properly constituted and independent EPA, this is also not the main game. Failure to address the scope of the Act means the EPA will be a mere observer as land clearing continues unabated. Native forests are logged and our biodiversity continues to decline. Real reform means that, in 5 years' time, we can celebrate measurable improvements rather than read another report on how the Act has failed to play its role in reversing the decline in Australia's environment. Guardian Essential Poll. Liberal voters want more progressive coalition as most Australians back net zero. Essential Poll, The Guardian. Liberal voters want the party to pursue more progressive policies and not spiral further into right-wing positions. According to a new poll that shows far more Australians back a net zero climate target than oppose it. The latest Guardian Essential poll also shows Susan Ley retains a slight edge as the most popular choice to lead the coalition. Slightly ahead of Andrew Hastie and Senator Jacinta Nampijin for Price. But despite troubled waters for the coalition, it isn't all smooth sailing for the Labour government. With most voters unconvinced about Anthony Albanese's meeting with Donald Trump and the much-vaunted critical minerals deal. The poll, which surveyed 1,041 voters last week, found an electoral appetite for the coalition to explore a more moderate policy offering. Asked, what direction do you think the Liberal Party shall be taking to provide an alternative government for Australia? 48% said they should adopt more progressive positions, while 28% said they should maintain the current position. The least popular response, at 24%, was to adopt more conservative positions. The support for more progressive positions was higher among the 236 voters in the poll who identified as coalition supporters. With 49% calling for more progressive positions, 23% backing current positions and 29% wanting more conservative policies. As the Liberal and National parties resume a bitter internal debate about whether to keep or dump their net zero targets first agreed by the Morrison government. In 2021, the Essential poll canvassed support for net zero. In total, 44% of voters supported net zero and 27% were against. With 29% neither supporting nor opposing. Sign up. Breaking news email. Among coalition voters, 35% supported net zero and 38% were opposed. Labour and Greens voters shared identical results, with 60% in favour and 13% opposed. Peter Lewis, executive director of Essential Media, said the polling showed the dissonance of the noise coming from the actual party rooms. The numbers suggest Liberal voters are looking at the current debate and want the Libs to mainstream the party, he said. Essential has conducted qualitative research for the Liberal Party. Ley is in no danger of an imminent challenge to her leadership, but a series of messy policy debates. Internal disquiet and public stumbles has heaped pressure on her position. Ley's personal approval rating dipped again, falling to 32% approval and 43% disapproval, a net approval rating of -11. That is down from -9, 32, -41% earlier this month and -2, 35 to 37 in August. Asked who would be the best person to lead the Liberal Party, 13% of voters said Ley, while 10% each voted for Hastie and Price. Angus Taylor, who Ley defeated in a party room ballot, scored 7%, while 12% said, somebody else, and 42% said, don't know. Among coalition voters specifically, 22% backed Ley and 20% Hastie, with Price on 13% and Taylor on 9%. Among coalition voters, 24% were unsure and 5% said someone else. Susan Ley obviously is suffering in her leadership, but nobody else is on the rise. When given the options, the majority of voters will either opt for someone else or nobody, Lewis said of the polling. Asked about Albanese's meeting with Trump, only 37% thought the outcomes would be good for Australia's long-term interests. While 18% said it would bad, another 26% thought it would have no impact and 20% were unsure. On specific outcomes, 42% of people were supportive of Trump's endorsement of the AUKUS Pact. But just 38% supported Australia providing US access to a port facility in Fremantle and the critical minerals deal. These are also warning signs for the government that despite the rave reviews for the Prime Minister's performance in Washington, the actual substance of the agreement with the US doesn't have majority support, Lewis said. Heat deaths aren't a thing. Coalition MPs weighing net zero given presentation casting doubt on climate science, Coalition, The Guardian. Coalition MPs weighing up whether to abandon net zero have been briefed on research that argued heat deaths aren't a thing. Played down the prospect of substantial sea level rises and claimed no one has ever made low-cost energy from wind and solar. Guardian Australia has viewed slides from a presentation the Conservative think tank Centre for Independent Studies, CIS, gave to MPs in Canberra this week. Along with the findings of private polling on net zero. The briefing was arranged by a coalition backbench committee and aimed to inform internal debate on policies, including the contentious climate target. The net zero voter research, presented to MPs, found 32% of 1,010 respondents wanted the target to remain, while 16% wanted it scrapped entirely. The remaining 52% wanted the target changed to more flexible, realistic, and achievable goals. According to polling from Insights portal viewed by Guardian Australia, that third option has emerged as the most likely landing spot for the coalition under a compromise designed to win the broadest support in a party room that is deeply divided on climate policy. Among the options discussed internally, all of which would represent a watering down of the Peter Dutton-era policy, were committing to repeal Labour's legislated climate targets, delaying the net zero deadline, and carving out certain industries, including agriculture. Just 9% of respondents to the poll supported extending the net zero deadline when presented with various options to change the target. Guardian Australia was unable to independently verify who commissioned the poll. Sign up. Breaking news email. But coalition sources familiar with the briefing said MPs were told it was funded by an anonymous, high-net-worth individual, not the party. Ahead of a scheduled meeting to debate net zero on Friday, about 20 MPs coalition attended Monday's briefing to learn about the polling, as well as research from the CIS. The Backbench Committee, run by Jane Hume and Simon Kennedy, has invited various groups, including the Blueprint Institute, McKinsey and Broken Bay Associates, to brief MPs with different perspectives about the energy debate. The CIS 60-slide presentation on Monday, titled What Matters in the Energy Debate, included anti-net zero cartoons and graphs questioning the impacts of climate change, the cost of renewables and the work of government agencies including the Australian Energy Market Operator, EMO, and Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, CISRO. One slide was titled, Heat Deaths Aren't a Thing, citing graphs included in September's climate risk assessment as supposed evidence. The slide did not mention the same report found that heat-related deaths could increase by 444% in Sydney if global heating surpassed 3°C. Another slide was headed, Small sea level rises are certain, large ones aren't, while another was titled, No one has ever made low-cost energy from wind and solar. A coalition source, speaking on the condition of anonymity, was alarmed at the briefing. To hear from them, CIS, was an important part of the policy review process, they said. But you could not help but to think that we heard from a think tank with a special affection for coal. Disappointingly, there was little to no consideration of environmental impacts. In a statement to Guardian Australia, the CIS Executive Director, Michael Stutchbury, defended the think tank's research. CIS research is providing the best explanation for why the rapid injection of intermittent solar and wind generation into the electricity grid has been accompanied by the loss of Australia's traditional cheap energy advantage, he said. In response to suggestions the CIS was too pro-coal, Stutchbury said the think tank had a technology-agnostic approach to the energy transition. But we also insist they must be cost-effective and not contribute to raising prices for Australian households, he said. The private polling presented to MPs covered several other questions about net zero and energy prices, including ones that canvassed delaying the transition and increasing the use of coal and gas. For example, respondents were asked if they would support delaying the net zero target if it meant lower prices and more reliable energy. About 63% said they would support that option, 19% were unsure and 18% said no. Dr. Dorian von Freehold from Insights Portal, who prepared the polling, declined to comment when contacted by Guardian Australia. Meanwhile, Hume on Tuesday announced she would introduce a private member's bill to lift the nuclear energy ban, renewing her party's pursuit of the energy source just months after it was rejected at the federal election. Hume's bill would repeal the John Howard era nuclear moratorium and allow the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and Australian Renewable Energy Agency to invest in the technology. The Senator's proposal is a substantially watered-down version of the policy the coalition took to the May election, which involved replacing retired coal-fired power stations with taxpayer-funded nuclear reactors at 7 sites nationwide. If you're serious about getting emissions down, you've got to have all options on the table, she said. If you're not technology agnostic, well then your real objective is about blanketing the country in renewable energy projects, rather than genuinely lowering emissions and energy prices. The only way to be technology agnostic is to remove the moratorium on nuclear energy.
Okay, that's my crazy news, mixed news, Australian news. I'm intermixhector. I'm going now. Gotta go. Goodbye. I'll see you later. Australian news. Hopefully you understand what's going on. Please, the facts of it. Reality. Subscribe to intermixhector.